Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sunset Safari. And unfortunately, Wendy, despite the best efforts of 1hr the mechanic, who made his television debut yesterday apparently, he was unable to sort out the engine problems with Wendy, so she is still down, and it is just myself and Wium, the wildebeest, who is on camera with me this afternoon, out and about. Brent and Jandre will be out doing bushwalk a little bit later, but for now it is just the two of us out in the wild of Wium Game Reserve in the Sabi Sands. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Janie, and this is a live safari. So everything that you are seeing right now is happening right here on the Sabi Sands, and it is also an interactive safari. So if you have any questions or any comments that you would like to make, you can do so on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email them through to questions@wildearth.tv. Sorry for the momentary distraction. I was just listening to the crested Franklin, who are shouting somewhere just behind us. I don't think they're sort of alarm calling at anything in particular. I think they're just making a bit of noise. And the one thing I have noticed is that after our first big rains yesterday, which is awesome to see, it was so nice to be out and about and see some groundwater, see some insects starting to come out. I have noticed that the birds are making a great deal of noise at the moment. So I've heard, just while we were sitting there looking at this view, I definitely heard some crested franklins, some contact calls between spur fowls. There's starlings calling. There was a collared barbet, black collared barbet as well. So plenty for us to see. Now, as far as we can tell from the morning safari, all of the lions that we know of are outside of our boundaries. And indeed, it was a very, very slow morning in terms of the big hairies and scaries. However, it gives us a perfect opportunity to go out and look at some of the little magical wonders of the bush. And it is time to do that. Let's see what we can find. We're just at the little pumped borehole outside Gallagher Lodge. We're going to make our way across to Central and see what we can find on that side. And it's almost like the bush has changed overnight with all of that rain. Franklins are still shouting, and for the first time today I'm actually feeling a little bit warmer. It's been quite chilly. It is around 19 degrees centigrade, which is 67 degrees Fahrenheit. So it has been, in my mind, a little bit chilly. And I went out today and James had a comment to make about my jumper, my jersey. He wanted to know why I was wearing a jumper that was twice my size. And I happen to think this is a lovely jumper and very cozy, so I don't know what he's talking about. Just stop for a moment, get to appreciate a rather fluffed up yellow-billed hornbill, and I think he agrees with me that it's a little bit chilly. You can see he's a bit puffy. And interestingly enough, what we've actually got here at the moment is a feeding party between two very closely related animals. So not related in terms of evolutionary biology at all, but in terms of their relationship with each other. So I have spoken about the relationship between dwarf mongoose and yellow-billed hornbills or red-billed hornbills, and although they're tucked away in the bush at the moment, there is a foraging family of dwarf mongoose moving around in here. There you go, you can just see one. Not the clearest view, but very, very common for these two species to be seen together. It's a great way of having an extra set of eyes a bit higher up for the mongoose, And then the hornbill get to capitalize on whatever the dwarf mongoose happen to miss. And I have mentioned this before, but there were a couple of studies done where hornbills would actually associate, the same hornbills would associate with the same family of dwarf mongoose and go out foraging each day with them, providing just that extra warning system if the mongoose needed it. And it got to the point where the mongoose, if the hornbills weren't around and they came out of their burrows, they'd actually delay their foraging mission until the hornbills made themselves known. And if the mongoose ever happened to oversleep, then the hornbills would sit at the entrance of the burrows and call to them. So a really, really interesting little dynamic. Unfortunately, our dwarf mongoose friends, I think, have disappeared into quite thick undergrowth. So we're going to set out on our mission to find other things. The one thing about this rain is it has certainly brought out the flies again with a vengeance. I just want to call myself in on the Game Drive channel, just to let them know that I'm out and about. Afternoon, Jamie WildEarth. The moment only station mobile. I'm working around Gallagher, shortcut towards Mbugu. I'm really thrilled that the rains did arrive when they did. I honestly didn't expect it. I thought we were in for a very dry season and very late rains. It could well still be that. We don't have as much rain as we would normally get, but at least we've had some. What a nice little family of Inyala coming through. It's all right, little ones. I'm going to stop. Forward. Oh, didn't have quite the momentum I wanted. And they're still looking a little scruffy from the rain. But I must say, all of the animals really seem to be in high spirits at the moment. Blackback puffback's making a lot of noise. That's that bill snapping that you can hear. Nyala disappearing off as well into the thick block. This is a block I know very, very well, having lost Karula twice in it. Once was with you, Wium. Yes. Where we searched for her for probably about close to an hour driving through the block. We'd just seen her and she disappeared off. She's a very sneaky leopard, that one. She's very, very good at disappearing. So that little click and then a whistle that you can hear, or could have heard just now with the Inyala, is a bird known as a black-backed puffback. Very cute little bird. Also, the old name used to be the puffed-back shrike, and it makes a bill-snapping sound. I'm going to just get to the top of this rise and then stop so we can listen to it. Just listen. There's about 3 of them calling. So that snapping sound at the beginning of the call is them snapping their beak, and then they follow on with a whistle. And just to show you what it looks like, this is the little bird that's making this noise. So the black-backed puffback. Ooh, page is blowing. So that is the black-backed puffback. Bright red eye, which is very, very distinctive. And then the reason it's called a puffback is in its mating display, which the males will be starting to show at this time of year, just after these first rains. They get that puffed up bunch of feathers on their back. It's a really, really cool little bird, and it's probably roughly about the size of my hand, maybe even a little bit smaller. So tiny, tiny little bird, little beautiful black and white bird. And most of the time you only really get to hear them. You don't always get to see them. So we'll leave them to their territorial shouting, which they're doing at the moment. They're just communicating to each other. We're going to hear a lot more in the way of bird calls now that the first rains have come, and there's plenty of insect activity and breeding potentials. Had much to say about my jersey or my jumper this afternoon. He has proved to be quite a successful fashion advisor, and on his suggestion I was looking into getting a hat that matched or looked very similar to the one that Nikki lent me, which was part of his suggestion. We've got some neighbors coming through. Gonna pull across to the side. Afternoon. How's it, Tex? Good morning. How are you? Good, good. Hi, guys. Lutu. Lutu. Okay. Enjoy. Have a good afternoon, guys. Bye. Cheers. So the word I was using there, nutu, it means nothing, as in I've found or seen nothing in the way of tracks for some of the more sort of safari-based viewing experiences, such as leopards or lions. So to continue on my subject of the jersey and then the hat, this hat is indeed a new hat, Daisy. And thank you very much for your compliments. It was a gift from somebody presented to me whilst I was on leave. And what's even nicer is that it stays on my head, which makes for quite a nice change. One thing about this time of year is, of course, it changes the driving style quite dramatically at times. And there's certain areas that you have to be very, very careful about avoiding, especially after big rains. We're okay now, the soil's had plenty of time to drain, but especially with Jigger's diff lock being slightly on the blink, to be slightly careful of where we go. Top of that list would be the seep lines in the area. So those places where there's a hard, impermeable layer underneath the soil layer. So all of the water is sort of pushed up as it drains through. It's pushed to the top surface level, and it makes for a very damp, slippery, and rather sticky driving experience. thing about the rain, you'd think it would make tracking a lot easier because the tracks would be nice and easy to see in the soft soil. But basically all it does is it compacts the soil in most places unless you get to a really muddy patch, and the tracks barely show up, if at all. It's actually much easier to track in winter time. The only thing that becomes a lot easier during the rainy season is aging the tracks, because you can look at, you know exactly when the last rains were. It's all right, Impala. Deterred slightly. I think they are going to make their way down to the dam. Now, I mentioned that I thought that these impala are making their way down to the dam. I think that they are. They were heading quite purposefully in that general direction. Ooh. Somebody startled a little bit. They are so beautifully agile. Wonderful to watch. And they are slowly making their way down to the dam. Now, Donna has picked up on the fact that, and is obviously a regular viewer of the dam cameras that we have up, and she's noticed that not that many animals have been going down to drink at the dam regularly now, just after the rains. And that's a very astute observation, and very true, and we can expect to see that more and more as summer goes on. And that is very simply just because a lot of the rain collected as groundwater, so made nice little puddles in different places, so the animals didn't have to travel as far to go and find a drink. The ram just bringing up the rear. But now these impala do have to make the walk towards the dam, because this ground has been very dry. It's very thirsty here, so most of that groundwater has already dried off. And although it rained consistently throughout most of yesterday, essentially stymieing our live safari drives. Although it did rain almost throughout the entire day, that's still not nearly enough to fully quench. A great start, but to really provide the water needs of the soil and the local plant life, there needs to be much more on a regular basis. So already all of those ground puddles, unless they are particularly large, will have already dried up and soaked into the ground, and the impalas are going to start, and the other general game animals are going to start moving back towards the dam. Unless we get more rain. I seem to think that this cold front is now over and past us, so I don't think it's going to be coming towards us anymore. We're not going to be getting any more rain in the next few days. Just wanted to see where those impala went, and if they did go down to the dam, or if they have, they're going down. Let's go follow them down, see them have a drink. If I can loop around. The unfortunate thing about the rain is I actually can't drive too much closer without the risk of us getting stuck, especially with Jigger's diff lock being in the state that it is. Don't think we're going to get a good view of the Impala from this side. Now, there was much talk before these big rains, and I'm sure it was mentioned, I know that I mentioned it, and I'm sure the other presenters mentioned it as well. And there was much talk about the fact that we had a bit of a guessing game on, a little bit of a bet going as to when the first big rains would have been. And there were lots and lots of different guesses. We decided that in order to count as a big first rain, it had to be over 20 mils. And yesterday we probably had somewhere in the region of 30. So it was definitely counted. Now, I can't remember exactly when everybody guessed. I know that both Brent and myself guessed towards the end of November. But I do believe the surprise winner of the guessing game, who predicted it spot on for yesterday, was Brian. So I think Brian was the winner of that particular challenge. Just to stop here and have a look. Now, I mentioned that I thought the Impala might be coming down to drink at the dam, but it actually seems like they're after the sweet grasses that are around the base here. We so often see them in this area, and they also get to lick up some of the mineral salts around the dam that have been left by water evaporating. So they've stopped there, they haven't gone for a drink. It's quite nice to just sit here and watch these impala from a distance. And there's this incredible clay mud smell that keeps wafting over us. It's combined with the less than wholesome scent of the rather stagnant water. So I'm very glad that we've had some rain, because there is that sort of stagnant water combined with several different types of dung smell about this dam at the moment. But the catfish seem to be very, very happy. We've all been splashing around. I'm sure that they're thrilled that their threat of being targeted by fish eagles has been dramatically reduced. Now I'm sitting here quietly, hoping to either hear alarm calls, but even more interesting from my side is to listen for the sound of a lilac-breasted roller call. Now, for those of you who are regular viewers, Nikki's hat came complete with a couple of lilac-breasted roller feathers tucked in one of the buttonholes. Now, James put about that I had stolen these lilac-breasted roller feathers from him, and he has a deal with a friend that he would trade lilac-breasted roller feathers for some different type of coffee. I haven't actually managed to ascertain which particular type of coffee or how this whole deal works, but he was very keen on getting me to hand over the feathers, as it were. And this conversation continued for quite a long time, as you can well imagine. Now, Dennis has suggested that I get James to find me some feathers to go in my hat, since he is now my fashion consultant. Well, Dennis, I'm actually quite scared of bringing up that particular topic of conversation again. I fear I might find myself in trouble. So for now, I will keep a lookout for some other feathers hopefully lilac-breasted roller feathers, which I will then parade in my own hat, much to his distaste. Oh, it's very nice and warm with the sun out. It's the first time I've been hot all day. Subject of the feathers in my hat, the one thing about being out on drives like this, live safari drives, is inevitably there will be, oh, this road's going to vanish. Oh, let's just get through this first. That dam is, this road around the edge of the dam, or the runoff from the dam, is actually starting to slowly break apart. It's going to need some serious packing with rocks. Anyway, now we're through that particular obstacle. One thing about doing these live shows is, of course, there will be people who know you from within your life who are watching. So, Steph, welcome to the Sunset Safari. I do hope the weather's good in Switzerland, and I certainly have missed you since you left our shores. Now, for those of you wondering, Steph was a former guide who worked with me when I was working in a different game reserve rather close to here, and we spent 6 months in each other's company. At one point we ran one of the camps together and we had an amazing time. We ran it on our own with a group of, I think it was somewhere in the region of 15 teenage girls from America between the ages of 14 to 18, and we had quite the adventure. Now, Steph wanted to know which feather I would choose to put in my hat. Ooh, that's a difficult one. It has to be a bird that I find particularly meaningful, I would say. And of course, the raptor feathers are probably a little bit too big for me to pop in my hat. But I think if I had to choose and I got lucky enough to find an appropriate one, I'd probably go with the feathers from, some of the smaller feathers from one of the little owls, just because I'm cross with the world. And Steph, I'm not sure, I enjoy looking at them so very much. They always look so grumpy and cross with the world. And Steph, I'm not sure if you remember the pearl-spotted owls who used to sit outside camp and call on a very regular basis. One of the situations that I dragged Steph into back when she was working with me was my best friend Emma and I decided we were going to try and collect skulls of the various animals. We wanted to set up a big display room to be able to show everybody the differences in anatomy, and it was a really fascinating project and we had a great deal of fun with it. But one of the things that we had to do was, you don't always find the skulls nice and picked clean, and you can't risk leaving them outside because they might get crunched and ruined by hyenas. So when we did find a carcass that we wanted to collect the skull of, it meant that we had to boil off the rest of the meat. And poor Steph and Belen, who were the two guides with us at the time, were involved in our boiling processes, which consisted of getting an enormous drum and setting it up over a fire and then boiling the skull for a day or two, as long as possible, and then giving them a bit of a scrub in bleach. And it was at times possibly one of the most pungent tasks I've ever been involved in. Named, she often sits in the tree above the Djuma Dam camera, so that may well be a very good place to start looking for feathers. And that's a really cool point, because I think regardless of whether or not I choose to put them in my hat, I think it might be worth going and investigating that particular situation, because I'm sure that James Henry would be very interested in attaining those particular feathers. We'll have to wait a little bit though, because now just after the rains, any feathers that we do find are probably going to be a little bit waterlogged and probably not a little bit muddy. But curious one, thank you for that information. It's very helpful to know. Out of the vehicle for 1 second before we get too mushy in this drainage line, which is one of those slippery sections I was telling you about. I just want to hop out and have a look at this pile of elephant dung for a moment. No, still a little bit damp. I'm looking for something in specific. Now, asked me that if I noticed any mushrooms growing out of the various piles of dung, if we could stop and have a look at them. Now, it is a little bit early to start seeing them, although they will pop out very, very soon. Their spores just need a little bit of time to germinate within the various dung piles. But Genevieve made a comment about how amazed she is, or never fails to be amazed, at how much the various dung piles contribute to. Sorry guys, just getting back to game drive. Okay. Exactly what you mean by the fact that tiles support Sorry everyone, we just went through a bit of a dip there, and I didn't want to say too much in case you missed it. But I was talking about the fact that Genevieve had picked up on the fact that dung in this area supports so many different varieties of life. And Genevieve is absolutely right. I was looking in that particular case for some termites that will be feeding off the decaying plant matter within the elephant dung. But there's a whole range of various insects and fungi that will then decompose and live off the elephant or various other pieces of dung. And it is always tremendously fascinating to me the various ways that everything within this kind of ecosystem interacts with each other. So I learned something today just after our little bushwalk cameo appearance this morning. I went and did a little bit of reading up on termite mounds, just to use an example of what I mean by everything being will carry on from what we were talking about. And of course, to continue with our theme of everything being connected to everything else, these impala are such an important part of this environment. So in terms of biomass, obviously they are the most widely distributed species in this greater Kruger National Park area, all the way through into the Sabi Sands. So obviously you can imagine with those enormous numbers, and they are the highest number of any of the various antelope species, you can imagine the impact that they have in terms of feeding on the environment. And not only that, but they are such a crucial source of prey for so many of the different animals. So wild dog especially, there have been studies done that show that they, in this kind of area, will in the region of somewhere between 70 to 80% of their diet at different times of the year will be impala. And then of course for the leopards as well, the general Sabi Sands area, these are such a vital piece of nourishment. So really, really all connected in an interesting way. And with their fascinating breeding strategies of essentially producing lambs all at exactly the same time, which makes for a much higher survival rate, they've proved very successful reproductively. But before I got distracted by the defecating impala ram contributing to the fertilization of this area, I was chatting about termite mounds, because we were looking at one earlier, and when I see one I'll stop and chat about it a little bit more. But what I read was that the rock monitors, or the legavans, which are really large, big lizards, they'll actually use the termite mounds as a way of incubating their eggs and keeping them at a stable temperature, because termites have this incredible system of vents to help keep their temperature within their termite mounds constant. Now there's a whole lot of things, or a whole lot of processes going on in a termite mound, and a lot of it produces heat as a waste product. So you can imagine underground it gets very, very hot, so they create that system of vents to keep it cool, and they keep that temperature almost at a constant range. Now this isn't the most fantastic example, lizard comes through and digs up a space, and she makes a hole so small that the termites will patch it up but not bother too much with the cause, and she'll leave her eggs there protected in probably the most stable incubator you could find out here. It's perfect. It is quite literally nature's incubator for her eggs. And a year later, when the first big rains come, which is what we've just had at the moment, when the ground and the termite mounds get a little bit softer, then the hatchlings can dig their way out. Very, very unusual to see. I certainly have never seen it. I would love to, but a good place to, now that we know, to start looking for little baby legavans or rock monitor lizards coming out. That would be exciting. I think that the chances are probably quite slim, but you never know. And this is a good area to start looking for them in, because over my first month or so working at WildEarth, we saw tracks of a rock monitor going all the way from Twin Dams north to the Vuyatela Dam and back again. Every single day his tracks were there. As though they're enjoying the pleasure of the first rains and the groundwater elsewhere. View of that. It's going to be a bit tricky. Let's just see if we can. Where did it land? Further back. Oh, we got it there. Here we go. Oh, cool. Go back. Just go back a little bit. Further. There. Very, very cool. And I'm surprised we haven't heard any alarm calls to the presence of this particular bird. It is a gymnogene, or an African harrier hawk. And I think that's the first time I've ever seen it with its bright red face, or at least a face as bright red as that. And that is because it is breeding season. There we can see, here the grey go-away bird has spotted it and has started to shout. And it's very, very common to see them flying at the low levels, but sort of beneath the tree or the highest trees. And the reason for that is that they're actually looking for the various nests of other birds to raid. They're specialized they've got double jointed elbows that bend backwards, and it allows them to just stick their claws into the various nests of other birds and steal their chicks and their eggs. which is why there's a very, very strong reaction to their presence. At the moment, it seems only the grey go-away bird has spotted it. It's also very common to see them being mobbed by other little birds to try and chase them away from their nests. And they will fly and actually impact directly on it. It flew away. I think there was a second one. I think this is a mated pair. There we go. You can see it. Yes, that's the second one. So I'm hoping that they're coming to nest in this area. But I mentioned that they've got that long tail, and that provides them with a little bit of stability and directional control, because as you can imagine, sweeping through in an area and flying through in an area like this requires quite a bit of dexterity. But I would say 90% of my sightings of these birds, they've had the typical yellow face. So it's nice to see that red flush. And that's not in any way a color morph. It's an actual physical flush when they are excited or agitated. So I'm not sure what got this particular bird. It's probably to do with their breeding season. Just listening to the sounds, I thought I heard impala alarm calling along this road, so I'm going to start heading in that direction. But it was a really, really nice view of an African harrier hawk. Very exciting. And Donna has made another astute observation in that probably in the next week or so we're going to start seeing the bush transform to becoming green. Although it will take another couple of months before it gets thick as it does in summer. And Donna pointed out that when that does happen, we would not have been able to see that particular bird at all. And that is very true. It's one of the exciting things about being in the bush all year round, is that each of the seasons has its own advantages and disadvantages. So in winter, you get the shorter days, it's a little bit chilly, especially early in the morning or late in the evening, but you can see so much further into the bush, and you've got a far greater chance of seeing some of the shy nocturnal creatures like aardvarks, not that I would know, of course, and honey badgers. But summer brings, of course, all kinds of new life, including lots and lots of mammal babies and the return of some of our really beautiful migratory bird species. I'm going to stop just at this corner and listen again. I only caught the tail end of them, so I'm not too sure if it was impala alarm calling. It sounded like it. They are calling. The impala are definitely alarm calling. Now they're just probably about, I'd say about 500 meters in that direction. A little bit tricky to see in this thick bush. Now what I want to do, because I'm almost at the end of Nyala Road South, is just get to the end of this junction. Let's loop around and see what we can find. Now when impala do alarm call, they don't tend to alarm call at nothing. So it's very often that if they are responding to something, either one of them's got a fright at something unknown and has decided to call, or it's in response to the presence of one of their main predators. Let's see if we can get around that side. And while we're doing that, we have a new viewer. So Paulie, welcome. I hope you're enjoying our live safaris, and we would like a little bit of a recap as to where we are. So we are currently sitting, oh, there's some impala here as well. Let's see what imaging. These group look a little bit calmer, don't look too distressed. There's one still shouting. What you looking at? There's a squirrel shouting as well. And a go-away bird. There's something here. Something's passed through. The relaxed body language of the other impala tells me that whatever it was is either far away or has moved off slightly. Let's just try and work out where they're looking. Is Franklin calling as well? Sorry, Paulie, I will get back to your question. Let's move a little bit ahead. Franklin's come running out from somewhere in here. Just going to stop here again. Listen for more alarm calls. More into the block, aren't they? Most of the go-away bird calls. Let's take a little drive in and see if we can find anything. I'm gonna have to do this fairly quickly. Paulie, sorry, I promise you I'm going to get back to your question soon as to whereabouts we are. Just need to go in here for a moment. About big holes. Yeah, especially after this rain. We're not on a seep line, but it's just, ooh, we are starting to be on a seep line. Let's just stop here. Still more alarm calls coming from up there. Now, I've mentioned earlier that the driving is a little bit more tricky after big rains, and unfortunately we're just coming into a seep line with big holes. Now, I have learned a lesson first of all about hidden aardvark burrows, where I disappeared into one. So let's loop around rather than driving through here, especially after the big rains. There's still alarm calls up to that side of me, which is a good sign. Oh, sorry. I'm a little bit worried about all the silver cluster leaves. It tells me there's a lot of underground water there. Oh, books falling everywhere. Let's go to Central Road. So yeah, I'm just going to go over this. There's still alarm calls coming up from that side, and it's close to the junction. So let's loop around that way. The Impala have all calmed down, so whatever it was, so Paulie, you were wondering where we are, and at the moment we are on Nyala Road South on Wium Game Reserve, which is part of the private concession, or the several concessions that make up the greater Sabi Sands area. And Sabi Sands is somewhere in the region of 65,000 hectares of land. You can think of it as 65,000 odd soccer fields or football fields. You'd be in the right region of exactly how enormous this area is. And the wonderful thing about the Sabi Sands is that it is in fact open to the Kruger, so the famous Kruger National Park, which is about 2 million hectares in size. It is all an open system. There's a couple of other concessions as well as crossing the borders of Mozambique and Zimbabwe. So the total area of this incredible wild place is probably somewhere in the region of 3 million hectares. So absolutely incredible size of open and unrestricted animal movement. Really, really phenomenal to think about. It's an area that is larger than Wales in size. And I mean Wales, the country, obviously. We are, as the WildEarth team on our live safari drives, are fortunate enough to be able to enjoy the areas of Djuma and Arathusa within the Sabi Sands. Let's just stop here for a moment. Need to listen again. It's all gone very, very quiet. Now, if I were to guess, and it would of course be a total guess, but just from what I've learned about watching the various leopards' behavior in this area, if I were to hazard a guess, and they were barking at a leopard, I'm not too sure, I would say it was probably Karula, just because she is so incredibly sneaky. And the times that I've seen her, she's moved completely silently and unnoticed through this area and through the bush. And if there were animals that alarm called at her, she almost immediately managed to disappear from their view, including mine a couple of times. There is a road just ahead of us, so let's loop around and see if we can see anything. Speaking of Karula, Julia in Houston, welcome to the Sunset Safari. Now Julia would like to know if I have any updates for her on Karula's whereabouts. And unfortunately, I honestly don't. I have only been back in this area for a couple of days, so I'm still getting back to grips with these various animal movements. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody's seen Karula in quite a while, and I know that there is a very high chance that Karula may well be pregnant. When I first started working here, she was seen mating with a mystery male up on Buffelshoek, and I do know that she's famous for denning sort of in the area and the drainage lines around or just to the north of Waiatela Dam. So I have explored those areas. If she does choose to go and hide away, she's probably got, when did I start working here? 13th of July. Okay, so she's still probably got another 2 months before she starts looking for den sites. 1 month, a month and a half. But it could well be that she will disappear off to an area that she's found favorable in the past. But I promise, as soon as we have any updates on Karula, we will let you know. I've looped around to hear the go-away birds calling again, but not in the frantic alarm calling kind of way. Fluffing up their feathers. Not their typical leopard alarm call sound. They make that go-away, that very sharp sound repeatedly if there is a threat to them. But because there's 4 of them now sitting in that tree, I'm still going to poke my nose in and see what we can find. Let's just explore. We don't want to run the risk of missing something crucial. Very different from driving the streets of New York. I'm just going to stop here because there's more holes around, and I don't feel like a repeat of our Tingana sighting where I fell into an aardvark hole and then didn't come out for another hour and a half. So for Paulie's benefit and any new viewers, there was a large male leopard calling right next to our car as we were watching it. and he moved through an area, and I drove to follow him and didn't realize it was a landmine area of aardvark burrows that just collapsed under the car, and we sank in right up to the wheelbase, so we didn't get out of that one for a while. But all's very, very quiet, which makes me think that whatever those impala were shouting at has quite possibly moved off. But it is great to have you on board, Paulie, and I hope that you will stay with us on a regular basis. I have now told you about where exactly we are, and these drives happen twice a day, and there's always plenty to see and learn about out here. And I know that myself personally, I'm always learning something new every single day and every moment that I get to spend out here. And the wonderful thing about the live safaris is that you actually get to follow stories of the individual animals, so the various leopards and the various lions. And a little bit later, when it starts to get cooler, we're actually going to go and visit where we last knew of the active hyena den. And we'll go and have a look and see if the cubs are out and playing. But all's very quiet here. So I'm not too sure what everybody was shouting about. We'll do another loop of the area. I'm going to loop back around, back the way that I came, just in case. Honey badger. Ah, whereabouts? Have a look. I know that Brent did mention he was planning on coming to have a look on this side for it this afternoon. Whereabouts was it? Right. Over that side?
No, right there next to it.
Yeah. Oh, there. Right. I see. That's where the dead honey badger was. And all that's left is a tuft of hair. I'm going to hop out and grab some of that hair just to show you what it looks like. Now, I was on leave for this particular scenario, but I believe that Brent found a rather dead, rather pungent honey badger. So I did hear about it, and there was a little bit So all that's left at the moment is a little bit of honey badger hair and skin. And you can see how incredibly thick and coarse that hair is, and it provides for a great protective layer. Okay, not much else to see on that. That's all that is left of our honey badger friend, so I'm going to return it to the wilds. But I am going to explain a little bit about what a honey badger is for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. Fierce attitudes. So it's probably most closely related to, it's like a cross between a badger and a mongoose, if I had to describe it like that. Let's find a nice picture. And it has an incredibly loose skin. It's a tiny animal. It's probably about that big in length, maybe a little bit bigger. Only a couple of kilograms. Let's find a nice picture. And it's a very fearsome little animal with very sharp teeth. And the reason that it's called a honey badger is because, obviously, it raids beehives and eats the bees and the various bee larvae. It's been hugely unhelpful. I found a picture of an otter, which wasn't really what I was going for. Let's find a nice picture. I've got Brent's particular library at the moment, which is quite the selection of books that I'm going through. We decided it wasn't worth doing the switch. Must be a picture of a honey badger somewhere. Anyway, as I was saying, it's got an incredibly loose skin that allows it to almost turn itself. If something grabs it, it will almost turn itself inside out and start to fight very fiercely back. Come on, book, you've never let me down before. There must be something here. It's got a nice loose skin. It's also got incredibly fearsome claws. And when I was fortunate enough to spend some time in the Kalahari, the southern Kalahari, the people who were working there were releasing a honey badger, or rehabilitating a honey badger cub, or kit I think they're called, to the wild. There we go. Finally, we're winning. So that is what a honey badger looks like, and in my experience that fearsome expression is in no way an exaggeration. So a very tough looking black and white animal. The aposematic colouring, so that bright stark contrast between the black and the white, is a very definite warning that it's not an animal to be messed with. And they have been known in the past to kill lions by ripping open the soft skin around the genitals. And they're all grouped together in this group of animals. There's various ones. There's the African civet and the genets. So that's the African civet, the genets, and the various little polecats and striped weasels that we get in this area. And they're all grouped together, sort of related to each other, due to the fact that they have very highly developed anal glands that they use to anal paste around. So whatever killed this particular honey badger was very, very brave. I have seen them fight off lions before, and I've seen a lioness take probably over an hour to kill a honey badger. But I'm going to now remove myself from the scent of this